Hello Blender heads! Flow 4.1 has been recently released, and in this video I'm going to present you some latest features that we've developed for this specific update. First of all, Blender is evolving very quickly and we want to stay aligned with the newest versions. So our latest Flow update has been prepared especially for the latest Blender versions. We fixed some minor and major bugs that occurred due to the system changes. And since that version, Flow will be supported only for the newest Blender versions. So if you still want to use Flow on older Blenders, you can just download Flow version 4.0 that is still available among your downloads. So the very first feature that I want to show you is simple scattering. And just to make it clear, we didn't mean to create another scattering add-on, which we have a lot of for Blender. The goal was to create a simple scattering system that would allow you to scatter the selected asset from the Flow library just within the add-on without using any other systems. As I already mentioned, it's simple and there's not a lot of configuration options. This is just the feature to distribute the asset on the active surface. So if you want to use more complex systems, just get a scattering add-on that would be suiting you probably better. But in this case, I will show you how to use our simple scattering. So simply select the asset and press scatter on active. This one will scatter the currently selected asset on the active object. So in this case, I will scatter this asset on this simple landscape. Now I have a pop-up window with some simple settings, which is scatter density in the beginning, which I can select from low, medium or high. And for grasses, I totally recommend high. I can set up a minimum distance for my asset, and for grasses, I recommend to stick with 0. If you have larger assets like trees, it's probably recommended to increase this value to like 3 or 4 meters. I can also align my object with a global z-axis, which can be also useful when you are scattering trees. So when I press OK, I can see my asset is scattered. I can do the same here. I'll press scatter on active. I have align global z-axis disabled. When I press OK, my grass is equally scattered along this surface. And what is quite cool feature that you can set up the scattering directly within Flow when you just select the emitter with this asset. So you can set up scatter density, you can tweak the minimum distance here again, you can select the scatter seed, which is initially loaded as a random one. You can tweak a scale, the minimum XY scale, here in this case the scale XY scale and Z scale is separated from each other. You can tweak the rotation randomize, and that's all. So maybe I'll scatter some tree here to show you the minimum distance. So I'll select a tree from our natural elements library. I will select some random tree here. And when I press scatter on active, I will use low and a minimum distance of like 3 meters here. And in this case, I want to use a global z-axis because trees should be probably always heading up. When I press OK, my trees are scattered on this surface again. And what is worth mentioning is that this system is using a duplicated object that is basing on its source. So in my case, the source was this landscape mesh here. And to make it possible to load multiple systems on this one mesh is to create a emitter that is like duplicating the geometry of this source object. So in my case, I have this one emitter. It's a separate object and it's aligned with this source object. So if you want to move it, simply do not move the emitter object, just select a source object and move it. You can do also some edits if you need. Of course, all edits will be applied automatically to the scattering system. So, for example, if you want to make this hill higher, you just edit this source mesh, and the scattering is automatically updating. The other feature that we've developed is scattering along curve, and this is also quite simplified version of scattering. It was just created to allow you to scatter the asset more precisely than with this first feature. So you can press this button when you have your asset selected, and you will be automatically switched to the edit mode of your freshly created curve with a draw on surface enabled. So you can just start drawing your curve on the surface that you have, and your asset will be distributed along this curve. Of course, it's a randomized system, so the asset is not distributed very equally. It's randomized a little bit, and of course you can tweak the randomization settings here as well. You can tweak the scatter offset by X and Y global axis. Of course, it's aligned to the curve. Of course, you can randomize the scale, the minimum scale, the maximum scale. You can tweak the array distance. Of course, you can also tweak the initial scale of the object. You can also tweak the rotation randomize, so each object is randomly rotated. And that's all. If you already have a predefined, a pre-made curve, you can just make this curve as active. Then when you will press scatter along curve, the object will be automatically scattered on this curve. Another feature that we've developed for Flow is creating array out of a collection instance. Of course, as you know, when you are loading the assets with Flow, it's loaded as an instance collection. And when we load the asset as an instance collection, we cannot make the array out of it. We cannot use any modifiers. So if I want to create an array of those trees, for example, I would need to make this editable and create an array from the editable object, which can be very problematic if we are using a lot of assets that we want to convert to an array. So in Flow 4.1, we've created the possibility of creating an array out of this instance without adding any modifiers. So when I have my asset loaded, I have this create array button here in the instance tools, and when I press it, the array is created. By the default, the array is not randomized. I can do it as a randomized array if I press this button, and also I can modify this randomization later here. Of course, I can tweak the array offset, array count. I can set up this minimum and maximum scale of my objects. So if I want to create a beautiful randomized array of those trees, I do not have to duplicate them one by one. I just can load this one asset and create an array out of it. And this new array feature can be very useful for interior essentials users, because now when, for example, you want to add some chairs around the table, you don't have to duplicate each of those objects one by one. You can just load the asset as an array, and you can now set up your chair array within a scene. So I will use 4 chairs here, for example. I will tweak the array distance, of course. And what is a very cool feature for, like I said, chairs, is rotation randomizing. So now when I have this array, it's looking quite generative. All those objects are not randomized in any way. I can now randomize a rotation a little bit, a Z rotation. So each of those chairs starts looking more naturally. Furthermore, I can also randomize a offset of each of those instances a little bit. So I will randomize X offset, I will randomize Y offset. Of course, if I don't like a look of this randomization, I can tweak seed to find the most suiting option here. And that's looking already much better than in the beginning. So I just now duplicate this chair array, and to randomize this again, I switch the seed. I do the random seed here, and I got my beautifully randomized chairs around the table. Of course, I can use this feature as well when I want to create an array of lamps on the ceiling. So when I add a lamp now, I can load this as an array without randomization, of course. This is not necessary when we are adding lamps. And I will add 3 lamps. I will tweak the offset. Maybe I'll scale this down a little bit. So I tweak the offset a little bit more. And I already have my lamps randomized without any need of adding them as editable objects. So this feature may be very useful for our interior essentials users. We've also added several more HDRIs to the asset creation. So when you press Ctrl+Shift+X to access the flow menu and press Save Asset to Library, you will see this thumbnail with a preview style here. And we've added several more previews than it were before. You can also see what your asset would look like if you select the certain preview. The very last feature that I wanted to mention in this video is the minor update that I've made to my very favorite tool, which is the Asset Painter. Until the latest Flow version, you were able only to duplicate one object with one mouse click using the Asset Painter. So when I press the button, I have only one object duplicated and it's spotted precisely in the place where I click. When I do a click and drag, I duplicate only one object. But since that version, we've added a brush settings to the Asset Painter tool settings. So now I can duplicate not only one, but I can duplicate up to 15 items at once. And I do not recommend to use that large number, it's only for the most die-hard machines, because this operation can get quite complex. But I will use like 5 items with the brush size of, let's say, 200 pixels. So now when I click with Ctrl, I duplicate 5 objects in the up to 5 objects within this one operation that are spread around my cursor, like with radius of 100 pixels. So it's a half of this value that we had there. Also, it works when I do click and drag, so I can duplicate multiple objects just within this one operation. You can get Flow 4.1 from BlenderMarket, or if you already purchased it, you can just go to your downloads and get the latest files to update. Hope you had fun and see you in another video.